This is a football pyramid of greatness, and in the next 20 minutes we are going to be making one, starting from the lowest tier among the best footballers ever and climbing to the top to the best player of all time. And yes, there is only one GOAT. But to do this, you'll need to understand why I chose a football pyramid. The other day, my friend and I were arguing about Henry being better than Ronaldinho. That's when I realized something. I said that the Frenchman has one World Cup, one Champions League like Dinho, but he also has 2 Premier League titles and 2 Golden Boots, plus he has superhuman speed. My friend replied that Dinho was also a champion in Italy. He said that Dinho has talent and charisma that eclipses any trophy haul. That's when I pulled up my unheard of statistics. I mentioned that Henry is the 3rd player with the most goal contributions in a single Premier League season. He has 24 goals and 20 assists, ahead of Allen, Suarez and Salah. After some back and forth, we agreed that Dinho and Henry are equally great. That's when I remember a post I saw on Twitter about the football GOAT pyramid. You've probably seen similar charts. They list players in a pyramid formation. The bottom of the pyramid contains the most players and the top contains the least. The greatness of these players is in ascending order. To even make this pyramid, a player must be universally regarded as a top 50 player of all time. Some are up for debate and opinion. In this case, Redman was breaking down the pyramid with about 25 players. These players were voted the top 25 players of all time in a Twitter poll with over 90,000 voters. I somewhat agree with this pyramid, but we can do better. So today I'll create my own football GOAT pyramid. I'll analyze each player on my greatness pyramid and explain each pick. But before I do, let me add a little context here. Football pyramids are just a visual representation of the greatest players of all time. Of course, according to the person making it. But this specific method of organizing a GOAT list is more practical than others. Instead of listing each player one after another, a pyramid formation lets you create tiers or levels of greatness. So, for example, if 2 players are extremely close in greatness and you can't decide exactly who should be higher all time, you can just simply put them in the same tier. Is Modric better than Iniesta, or is Iniesta greater than Modric? Well, depends on who you ask, but you can certainly say that they belong at the same tier of greatness. The football greatness pyramid lets you rank players historically. It's flexible, not forcing players into specific roles, yet accurate and universal. In 2004, the brilliant Pelé published the controversial book FIFA 100. The book showcases Pelé top 100 football players, without clearly stating the criteria for ranking. It appears it chose based on personal sentiment. Brazilian midfielder Gerson played alongside Pelé at the 66 and 1970 World Cups. He reacted to his omission by tearing up a copy of the list on a Brazilian television show. Nevertheless, this was the most reputable list to date, but that was 20 years ago, and in those 20 years a lot changed. Thierry Henry won another Champions League, Ronaldinho mesmerized every football fan, a player named Cristiano Ronaldo beat Pelé's total goal scored record, and a 5 feet and 7 inches Argentinian won everything in football. And in this pyramid they formed 4 tiers, each representing a level of greatness. It's good, but in my opinion it does have its flaws, some of which I can bring up without giving away my own pyramid. But by now we have to create 5 new spots in the last tier. Too many players have already reached the tier 4 level, and if we only allow 15 players in the last tier, it would be unfair to a lot of players. So my tier 4 has 20 players, and tier 2 doesn't look quite right either, but we'll get to that shortly. So here's the formula for my pyramid. First of all, longevity is important, but I value a player's peak more than their longevity. Some players played for 15 plus seasons, but never won anything major. Others played for a decade, elite football on fire for a couple seasons. I like to lean towards the players who reach the highest peak. I prefer them over the players who were the most consistent. Of course, both of these qualities are extremely important. You could say that my list is a combination of skill, accomplishment, and quality of career. Second, as much as I would like to make a list on pure football ability, other factors come into play. For example, just considering a player's skill set and straight up football talent, I would have a guy like Eden Hazard in my all-time top 30 list. But of course, we have to consider things like accolades, trophies, career numbers, and accomplishments. And that's where Hazard falls short and falls out of this list. For example, is Thomas Muller a better football player than Hazard? No. You could say that he had a better career. The third thing is that for every player that you feel deserves a spot on this pyramid, that player must take the spot of another player. Far too often I see all-time lists. People criticize those lists, mentioning players they think deserve a spot, but they they can't say who should lose a spot. The fourth factor in my formula is that hero plays a tremendous role in a player's legacy and greatness. This is one of the biggest flaws with creating all-time charts, but there's no real way to measure that role. Take Rashford from Manchester United. Rashford is a good winger in today's football, but if he played in 1965 with the skill set that he has today, Rashford would be in the GOAT debate. The game has evolved. Nutrition and training methods are getting better and better every day. The average player in today's league is without a doubt better than the average player 40 to 50 years ago. But think about it like this: rather than considering who is flat out better, consider who was greater relative to their competition. Of course, it's not the only factor that matters, but it is an important one. And the fifth factor to consider is that I know people will disagree with this list, and that's perfectly fine. Regardless of how accurate a list may seem to some, it will always be inaccurate to others. I don't expect everyone to agree with my list, just as I don't agree with everybody else's list. In fact, I don't even think there's a way to accurately make a greatness pyramid. Lists of the greatness players of all time are out there. Former legends, current players, and established members of the football media create them. Even that list gets roasted and torn apart. You just can't please everyone, but that's okay. In fact, I encourage you all to share your pyramids in the comments below. Feel free to tell us why you have yours arranged the way you do. So now that we've seen examples, we've broken down the rules, we've seen the formula. Let's get into this pyramid. Starting with my tier 4, we have Michel Platini, an OG. Iconic player of the 80s. He was a prolific goal scorer. No one could stop him. Won 3 Ballon d'Ors, won 1 Champions League with Juventus, then joined FIFA and became corrupt. Next is Luka Modric, a player who doesn't really get a lot of love these days because he stole 1 Ballon d'Or from Cristiano in 2018. But he won 5 Champions Leagues and took Croatia to a World Cup final with an average team. Eusebio. Eusebio was the player that rivaled Pelé during the 60s and 70s, like Cristiano versus Messi in the last decades. So here's something pretty crazy for those who aren't too familiar with Eusebio. The Black Panther only won the Champions League once, but he reached the finals 4 times, and he got Portugal 3rd place in the World Cup of '66. Next is Neymar, probably the least condecorated player on this list, but you just need to watch 30 seconds of Neymar's highlights to know that he deserves to be here. Plus, he is the top goal scorer for Brazil, ahead of Pelé, Dinho, Romário and the Brazilian Ronaldo. Neymar is an example of a player who could, skill-wise, rank higher on this list. However, due to his lack of hard work and longevity, he falls where he does. Nonetheless, he is an incredible player. The next player on tier 4 is Gianluigi Buffon. He has earned the respect of football fans around the globe throughout his 28-year career. Definitely one of the best goalkeepers of all time. Next is Romário, the most underrated striker ever. Romário was one of the most prolific goal scorers of all time. FIFA confirmed that he has more than 900 goals. Next is Mbappe. He won the 2020 World Cup, he went to the finals of the 2024 World Cup, is already one of the best goal scorers in the Champions League and is only 25. Even if he retires today, he will be considered one of the greats. Next is Bobby Charlton, the guy that survived a plane crash. He won the Champions League, beating Eusebio, Puskas and Di Stefano. He is also responsible for the only World Cup that England has. For that reason, everybody would agree that Bobby is the best English footballer of all time. Roberto Carlos, possibly the best left back in history, won 3 champions with Real Madrid and won a World Cup with Brazil. He also scored the most iconic free kick ever, one that defied the laws of physics in the process. Matthaus, the German Kaiser, the defensive midfielder captained the German team of 1990 to a World Cup win. Diego Maradona said that Matthaus is the best rival he's ever had. I guess that's enough to define him. Now, I was hesitant in choosing Matthaus over Sergio Busquets. In my opinion, Busquets is one of the best defensive midfielders in history. He can go head to head with anybody. But while Busquets played with Iniesta, Xavi, Messi, Henry, Sergio Ramos, all of which made it to this list, Matthaus was the main player of his team. So I gave priority to the most influential player. Next is Neuer. If I had to choose a goalkeeper for my dream team, it would be Neuer. The man won the German championship 11 times, plus 2 Champions Leagues Leagues and 1 World Cup. Almost won the Ballon d'Or against Messi and Ronaldo in their primes as a goalkeeper. Now we have Henry. I personally love Henry. I don't think he gets enough recognition. As I said in the beginning, he won 1 World Cup, 1 European Cup and 1 Champions League. He was part of the Invincibles Arsenal team, the only team to go 1 season without defeats in the Premier League. He won 2 Golden Boots, but was also the player with most assists in the world during many years. And it's funny. Next we have Rivaldo, yet another player that has won the most important trophies in football. 1 World Cup, 1 Champions League and 1 Ballon d'Or. Looking at his list, it might seem easy to do, but there's very few players to do it. Rivaldo is criminally underrated and deserves a spot on my list. Ronaldinho. I don't think Ronaldinho's spot on this pyramid needs much of an explanation. He is an incredible player, admired by everybody. He would definitely be a lot higher if he had more longevity. Another Brazilian on this tier would be Cafu, probably the greatest right back to have played the game. Only 3 football players have ever won the World Cup, Copa America, Copa Libertadores, Champions League and Club World Cup. Julian Alvarez and Dida are the other 2. Di Stefano. The history of Real Madrid starts with this man. He won the first 5 Champions League that have been played. Still appears on the list of many football records 60 years after he retired. So why isn't he higher on my list? Because he played in a time where football wasn't organized yet. For example, in the first Champions League won by Di Stefano, Chelsea, England's champion at the time, wasn't allowed to play in the Europe competition. The English Federation didn't want the English clubs to get distracted by anything other than local competitions. As a result, Real Madrid wasn't really playing against the best teams at that time. For these types of reasons, I can't give as much credit to the older players. Which brings me to the next player, Ferenc Puskás. He actually played with Di Stefano but only won 3 Champions Leagues. Almost 80 years later, Puskás is still the player with most goals scored in the Champions League finals. But once again, I can't take players from this time as seriously. I might be wrong here, but this is my pyramid and I do whatever I want. Another legendary duo are the Spaniards Xavi and Iniesta. Both won 1 World Cup, 2 European Cups and 4 Champions Leagues. They were at the heart of the most overpowered brand of football ever, called Tiki-Taka. They could be higher on the pyramid, but they're not. Why? For the same reasons I left Busquets out of my pyramid, I can't put Xavi and Iniesta on a better tier, because they played in the shadow of an alien. To be on a higher tier on my list, you need to be able to carry a team by yourself, but we will get there in a sec. Rounding out tier 4 is Maldini. He's a 5-time Champions League winner and one of the best center backs of all time. He is also a 7-time Italian champion. Maldini really set the stage for future aggressive center backs. Now, before we continue, these players are in no particular order. As I stated before, a football pyramid has many perks. One is that, unlike a numerical list, it has a lot of flexibility with these tiers. For example, you can argue that Modric was better than Iniesta. You can also argue that Romario was greater than Eusebio, but the overall premise is that they are equally great. Some of these players may be low tier 4, others may be high tier 4. The stage is set for thousands of players to choose from, but only a handful will make it. Starting off tier 3, we have Sergio Ramos. He possesses the record for the most goals scored by a defender in the Champions League. If you had to make a perfect center back in a lab, Sergio Ramos would be the result. Quick, intelligent, aggressive, leader, durable, ran one of the most unstoppable teams the game has ever seen with Cristiano Ronaldo. Perfect curriculum. He won everything that is to win in football. Some may argue that he is on the same level of Xavi, Iniesta and Modric, but I personally think that Ramos is more influential. I feel like Ramos as a center back is as influential as many legendary forwards. He has that energy that makes him a leader. Maybe the only center back as influential on a team would be Beckenbauer, who is also on this tier. So much so that Beckenbauer won 2 Ballon d'Ors playing as a center back or defensive midfielder. He was the man responsible for making Bayern Munich the colossus that it is today. And another player that has no weaknesses on his resume. Won the World Cup, 1 European Cup, 3 Champions League and dominated German German football, along with another player on this tier, Gerd Müller, the man who accomplished the impossible 55 years ago when he scored 85 goals in one calendar year. That record would only be broken 40 years later by Lionel Messi. The man was unstoppable. He also scored 57 hat-tricks in his career, a number only bested by Cristiano and Pelé. Next is Zinedine Zidane. After winning one World Cup and one Champions League, he proved he was virtually unstoppable when he was in the zone. He's earned these spots. Zidane is a player that, if we were creating a list strictly based on football skill and talent, would possibly be in the top 5 all time, but he didn't sustain his career as much as other players above him, so he falls in tier 3. The Brazilian Ronaldo. Ronaldo is an interesting player. As Zidane, if we judge him for his talent, he would be top 5, the youngest player to win the Ballon d'Or at just 21 years old, but he had serious injuries early in his career. The injuries seriously undermined his potential. Nonetheless, he was able to make a huge impact on the game. Think of an all-time great player from the 2000s to the 2010s, and chances are you looked up to him. This man played his best years before he got injured, so his numbers don't reflect just how big of an impact he had on the game. But Ronaldo is truly one of football's most legendary figures. In the same tier we have Cruyff. Revolutionized the game. He was the cornerstone of Ajax dynasty during the 70s, 3 back-to-back Champions League titles, and the pioneer of the total football style, has an impressive record of goals and assists, one of the most iconic playmakers in history, and he did all that while being an heavy smoker. He could be higher if he had won the World Cup final against Beckenbauer and Gerd Müller in 74. And to finish off the third tier, we have Maradona. This is going to be a controversial one, but I couldn't put Maradona any higher. Yes, Maradona is a special talent. This was the type of player that could win a team any trophy by himself. In fact, he did. He almost single-handedly won Argentina the World Cup and took Napoli, which at the time was an average team, to be Italian champion. This was a supernatural talent. However, Maradona wasn't even close to scoring 1,000 goals like the players above him. He didn't win any Champions League. He would probably do that if it wasn't for the suspensions he got from drug abuse. Maradona only made it to this tier because he was unstoppable, but he didn't have the noteworthy career required to be in the tier above. Now, this next tier, tier 2, is for the players that you can make a strong argument for being the GOAT. Players that have a better career, talent, longevity and impact than any other. Players that make you say, you know, maybe so-and-so is the greatest player of all time. So first up we have Pelé. Going back to what I previously said, you could 100% make an argument that Pelé is the GOAT. 3 World Cups, 762 goals and the most hat-tricks scored in football history. On paper, I think Pelé probably has one of the best resumes of any player ever. So I guess what separates him from being the GOAT is the fact that he only played in Brazil during the 60s. Would he have scored as many goals as he did if he played in Europe? Would he win as much if he had rivaled Eusebio, George Best, Bobby Charlton and Cruyff? Would he be able to dominate as much? Or would he be considered just as good as them? Of course, I'm just being picky here. You can count only a few players who have been better than Pelé. To say that he was a force is an understatement. But if I had to pinpoint why he isn't in tier 1, especially with his unbelievable resume, that might just be why. Next is Cristiano Ronaldo. When it's all said and done for Ronaldo, he'll more than likely climb to the top or near the top of about every major statistical category. And as his career begins to wind down, I think over the next couple years, we'll really begin to see where he truly stands all time. Cristiano is a very polarizing player, meaning some people love him and some people hate him. Some people have him as their GOATs and others don't even have him in their top 10. Personally, I have him right here, about as close as you can get to tier 1. A lot of people try to discredit Ronaldo. However, he has won 5 champions, scored the most goals in football history, and has been a champion in Italy, England and Spain. He also won Portugal their first ever trophy, whether you like it or not. This is one of the greatest careers we have ever seen. Obviously, his shortcomings in the World Cup is what most people keep coming back to, rightfully so. The reasons for these shortcomings aren't just as simple as as you lost. However, if you want to be the greatest of all time, you will be held to unbelievably high standards. At this very moment, I see Ronaldo as a tier 2 player. He is exceptionally hardworking. The grit on this man makes him the most inspiring sportsman on the planet. And I will say one thing that I really admired while I sat down and looked over the credentials for this video was Cristiano's longevity. 20 years of razor sharp consistency. But when it comes to the greatest player of all time, every player falls short of one man. And that, of course, is Lionel Messi. Football is a sport with many rules and factors. There are infinite opinions to filter through, and still, throughout all of this, most football fans almost unanimously agree that Messi is the greatest player of all time. I like to think about it like this. Imagine you come in contact with someone who has never watched or played football in their entire life. Now, imagine you play some classic Barcelona footage around late 2000, early 2010s. If you ask that person who they thought the best player on the pitch was, they would without a doubt immediately point to Messi. Not because he's the best goal scorer, not because he's the best playmaker, not because he's the best dribbler or any of that. Even without context or predetermined notion of the game, Lionel Messi was so much better than everyone else around him that he just looked different, he moved different, he played different. Some players transcend their generation, but Messi transcended the sports altogether. He has won World Cup, 4 champions and 8 Ballon d'Ors. He has also won 6 Golden Boots and scored 19 goals in a calendar year. Additionally, he is the player with most assists in football. That stuff is obviously amazing, but forget all the accolades, forget all the trophies, forget all the awards, and just watch the man play. And that's just about all the evidence you need. It's funny because the legend of some players often inflates their actual greatness. We let our bias cloud our judgment. We remember events the way we choose to remember them. Oftentimes, this leads to believe our favorite players were possibly greater than they actually were. But with Messi, he is every bit as incredible as people say. Nearly 100 years of football and there's still nothing quite like Lionel Messi. So there you go, my football GOAT pyramid. I spent quite a bit of time breaking this down and really looked into each and every factor that made up my formula. Before we go, I want to talk about some of these factors. I'll go into detail about some of the small things that I noticed throughout this process. I noticed that the most represented nationality is Brazil with 8 players on my pyramid, and only 11 out of 30 players are above 5'11". I also want to note that after the first 25 or so greatest players, things get a bit messy. At the top of the pyramid, greatness and accomplishments are clearer. As you move down, the line becomes a bit fuzzy. For example, guys that could have easily been in tier 4 include Van Basten, Lewandowski, Baggio, Luis Suarez, Bergkamp, Busquets and countless other players. But at some point I just have to make a cutoff, and this is it. So here's an interesting detail. 4 players on my pyramid played their first game in the 50s, 4 were debuted in the 60s, 3 in the 70s, 3 in the 80s, 7 in the 90s and 8 in the 2000s. Plus Mbappe, who played his first professional game in 2015. Players usually peak in the decade following the one they first played in. I think you could accurately say that, according to my pyramid, 2000s football was the most talented or greatest era. This concept is accepted by many football fans. This pyramid certainly backs up that claim. Of course, this is just my pyramid. It is by no means universally correct or even accurate. However, it's worth noting nonetheless. You could consider this my top 30 observation. There are only 9 players on my pyramid who don't have a World Cup. Unless you have absurd career numbers, have longevity on your side, or impacted the game in ways that don't show up in your numbers, it's basically impossible to get on this list without a World Cup. But remember, I am not the authority on this matter, just like anybody else. This is my own personal GOAT pyramid, and I think it's pretty good. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Is someone too high? Is someone too low? Is someone that isn't even on the list that should have been? What corrections would you make, and what would your pyramid look like? Thank you for tuning in. Hope you all enjoyed. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. New content every other week, and until next time.